Men, how many times have you heard one of your mates complain about his achy joints as he says, "Oh, I'm getting old. I'm getting old. That's the reason why I cannot do X, Y, or Z anymore." Well, gentlemen, the reason for that is because you are no longer training your strength, power, or speed. You have become a little bit lazy. And now this is not a beasting, this is an educational lecture as always on my channel. But what I will say is, I promise by the end of this video you will understand the process of training strength, progressing onto power, progressing onto speed when you are over the age of 40. How it can be achieved, how important it is that you do this and do this process properly. And you'll see what happens if you do not do it. For those of you that just jumped on the channel, welcome. My name is Paul Green. Great to have you here on this channel. I'm a former British paratrooper and Special Forces Support Group operator. I have a lot of experience with speed. Paratroopers are renowned for their extreme speed of getting in and out of crazy situations. If you are slow, you die. So, training, strength, then progressing it to explosive strength, then power, then speed is extremely important in these elite military units, including the RAF, the Royal Marines and the Parachute Regiment, those of which I have trained for over the past decade. Nowadays, I run an online coaching service for men over the age of 40 called the Longevity Program, in which I train men of extreme sporting backgrounds: free runners, skydivers, martial artists, kayakers, rock climbers, mountain bikers, and the likes. If that's something you're interested in, jump on the channel, links, give us a shout, let me know. Anyway, the plan. Why strength, power, and speed? Why am I even talking about this? Just let me lift weights. Nah. Geezers. This is important shit. So I'll go straight into the why after this slide. Then I'm going to talk about training strength, training power, training speed. If that sounds something you'd be interested in, then stick around. Remember, this is a long old process, and simply going to the gym and just winging it is not good enough, right? The bigger picture is extremely important if you're over the age of 40. If you're young, 20-year-old, doesn't really make a difference, right? So, this is the why. When we are 40-year-old, our type 2B muscle fibers will start to decline at about 1% per year. 10% a decade. What are type 2B muscle fibers? Type 2B muscle fibers are those that are responsible for strength, power and speed. Now, many people, many middle-aged men will sit there and complain that they are not faster than they used to be when they were a kid. They are not strong as they used to be. They're not powerful as they used to be. Are they training power, strength and speed? Are they doing it? Are they doing it? Are they training this? Or are they just getting lazy and allowing this decline to take place? That is my question. So you have a choice. You either accept the decline or you train it so they improve. This is not going to happen if you train. It just doesn't work like that. Think about it. You train properly, you get stronger. Does this decline happen? If you just train strength, that is 33% of your type 2B muscle fibers if you just train strength. So you will reduce the decline by a third. Are you training power? Are you training speed? It's a choice, gentlemen. Right, let's talk about strength. Before we get to strength, there is a prerequisite, right? And the longevity program calls it the fundamental block. However, just for fun, I like to call this the Diane analogy. Would I ever get Diane, aged 60, never trained in her life, in the gym doing a strength session? Day 1, week 1. Would I ever get her there and do maximal strength? No, I wouldn't. So what does she need to do? if she's a complete beginner? Well, she needs to tick a few boxes before then she can earn the right to train strength properly. For example, she needs to display safe technique. She needs to establish a fundamental single joint strength. Knees, hips, shoulders, elbows. Basics. She needs to be able to train at a full range of motion, or aspire to train at a full range of motion. Right? She needs to have earned the right to train at 90 and 95% intensity. And yes, you could call this a hypertrophy block. Yeah? However, the Diane analogy is much more fitting. I'll let you take that with you. Right. And this, what it looks like, is really simple stuff. I like to run 2 working sets per exercise in the gym. 90 and 95% intensity. 3-minute rest periods. And I like to slow things down. The reason I like to slow things down is I like people to have plenty of time at the end ranges. I've researched the papers on tempo and actual improving muscle size, so there's not much difference. However, there is a technical difference in doing this tempo, and there is a psychological difference in doing this tempo, especially when you are getting people to train at a full range of motion for the first time in decades. So, the Diane analogy. You have to earn the right to train strength. Make sense? Nice one. Right, okay, we are on to training strength. We have progressed. We have earned the right to train strength. So what does that look like? Well, what it does look like is we reduce the tempo that we were doing each rep. So we wouldn't do 3 seconds on the way down and 1 second on the way up and pause and all that stuff. We would simply just get the weight under control on the way down, and we would return it back to the normal position. So each rep would take 1.5 seconds or 2 seconds maximum. However, as we start to do maximum strength 1RMs and stuff, you would notice one of these reps may take 3 or 4 seconds, especially when you're doing deadlifts. You reduce the reps of the previous and increase the rest periods to, instead of 3 minutes, it'll be about 3 to 5 minutes. Or simply just however much rest you need. If you need 10 minutes rest on a strength block, you can have it. Simple as that. The most important thing is you lifting as much weight as you can in the session. From the single joint movements, you move to introduce multi-joint movements, so more squats, deadlifts, bench press, stuff like that. On a good strength training block, you would introduce explosive strength as well. That's where we drop the weight slightly and we improve the explosiveness of that expression of strength. As with all good strength training blocks as well, because the long-term vision is type 2B muscle fibers, strength, power, speed, we introduce agility, basic agility at this stage as well. Basically, the most you can lift, the most weight you can lift. And this looks like the big 3. With your strength block, this is where you start to probably bring in, it's called a deload week. You don't really need them on the previous, Diane prerequisite 12-week block. But when you're absolutely sending it for numbers day in, day out, you best know that if you're 40-odd-year-old, 50-odd-year-old, 4 or 5 weeks in, you're going to need it's called a peak week. And what happens is you reduce the weight you lift and you reduce the volume, so the amount of that you're doing, by 50%, both 50%. Weight lifted, half it. Volume, half it. And then after that week, you then return back to normal training. And what it looks like is your strength increases. That week it'll just go bosh, and then it'll continue to improve like that. And that ensures that you can sustain a steady increase over a 12-week period. 12-week period is just something I've just pulled from the longevity program. I run 3 12-week blocks, which some may say is not long enough. However, in this video explanation, I will be doing 4 12-week blocks to cover the preparation phase for strength, which is the fundamentals block, 12 weeks of strength, and in the longevity program it is 12 weeks of power and speed. However, who cares about the longevity program? This is a video about type 2B muscle fibers and counteracting that decline. Power. We change the intent of fucking get that weight off the floor however we can to be as explosive as possible. Power is the signal from the brain to that muscle, and it is the speed of that signal. So there is now a quickness, there is now a deep aggression to be as explosive as possible, as powerful as possible. So there's a change in intent, and it's significant that you understand this. For many years of my life, I've been considered strong, right? But I've never been considered powerful because I very rarely have trained power until recently. Instead of the introduction of the explosive power, we now look to develop explosive power. And this is through plyometric movements predominantly. And plyometric movements is where we develop our explosive power to a really good standard. And plyometrics is the body's exploitation of something called the stretch shortening cycle. Basically, our body's natural spring, we exploit that through a whole host of exercises. However, it would start really simple. And there's a little bit of agility, there's a little bit of coordination linked in with this. However, we get them in early parts of the program, and then when we get to the speed part, we've already done a little bit of it. So the movements we may advance the movements depending on individual responses and stuff like that. So the movements change now, right? You're not necessarily going to do a deadlift on a power block, because the movement has to allow a powerful expression. What I mean by that is the movement needs to allow an expression of strength times speed. And if it doesn't, it's not doing power. It's not training power. It's either training strength or it's training like explosive strength. For example, you wouldn't do... Let's say for example, you would never do a thruster for power. However, you would do a push press where it's a tiny break at the hips and the knee, bang, and you're sending that weight up to the sky in a half a second. And there is an app on this, and it measures the speed of your reps. That's when these apps become really useful, when we're training explosive strength or power or speed. The speed of the reps. Does that make sense? And this is where strength speed comes into it. Our strength, now we are moving it fast. Whereas on the strength phase, we don't care how fast it is. We just want to get it up and have it a successful, safe rep. From there, we develop drop landings, free runner central, and we do deceleration as well. We're just starting to introduce things which progress nicely onto the power block. And a way a lot of people like to split this into their training week with masters athletes over 40, over 50, is plyo is very intense on the body, typically. Depends how it's done. So let's say, for example, I done jumping off a box, landing very softly. That would be drop landing, yeah? But on day one, if I'm just doing the landings that are low intensity, absolutely fine. Not really. I'm not really... That would class as a low intensity low. What I mean by intensity here is fatigue. Do you know what I mean? So day one, high intensity, high fatigue upper body, but also that's paired with low intensity plyo, which is that exploitation of the spring in the body, where that could be like a little mini jump, depending on your ability level and your ability to produce speed, especially in certain minimalistic ranges of motion. So, and then on day two, it'll be a low intensity lower paired with a plyo high intensity upper. And again, I'm meaning fatigue, high fatigue. And one main consideration with this, that's why I've done it as a 3-day split in the week, is you need about 2 days in between these, especially your 40, 50-year-old. And then the day three, low intensity upper, plyo high intensity lower. So keep mixing up the variables, and we're ticking off different boxes within the power bracket. Hopefully you understand that. A little bit nerdy, but you think this is nerdy, wait till we get on to speed. I've kept it really simple though. I just want to give you an overview of everything and maybe inspire some of you to think long term. Instead of thinking about this week, yeah, I've got to get in the gym 4 times this week. Think about the next year. Think about, towards the end of summer, you're going to be training speed for the first time in your life. Imagine that. Unreal. Ticking off all 3 of them boxes for your type 2B muscle fibers. Strength, power, speed, in that order. Anyway, the really cool thing about speed, a speed block, is that it brings everything together. And on a longevity program, strength and power are linked together. And that's called the athleticism block. And it's where you truly start to train like an athlete. And I know you don't see yourselves as an athlete. You are. Absolutely. You absolutely are. Start believing that you're an athlete now when you're doing your strength block. And then think about 12 weeks down the line, that gets tightened into a power block. And that gets tightened into a speed block. With all of that, imagine the byproducts of this. You're training power, you're training speed. Do you think you're going to be worried about a reoccurring elbow injury? Like, it's deep. You're just deepening the athleticism. Injury rehab, long gone. Lads, honestly, long-term vision is where it's at. So, speed. Develop top speed, develop acceleration. You've got 2 sides of each coin. And one way that's pretty cool to do this is sub-body weight for your acceleration to start off the speed block. And you could just do this with a resistance band to get you off the line. To aid you, so sub-body weight will basically give you the ability to produce a faster contraction at the start. And then as you develop that faster contraction, you would then reduce that body weight, sub-body weight to maybe body weight. And then you hopefully maintain that same speed of contraction. Reduce the weight lifted to fit the sporting context. So, for example, if you're doing rock climbing or if you're doing martial arts, you would, or let's say you're doing wrestling, you would maybe reduce the weight you lifted to, like, I don't know, maybe half of your opponent's body weight or something like that. However you see your game wanting to be displayed. So you can kind of be a little bit specific with some movements here, but the main bulk of it doesn't need to be specific. The more specific you are, the more pointless things become. So good basics, we're here to improve our speed. And in speed is a shift of focus from power. We now need the speed of the contraction. Power is the speed of the signal. Bang! This is the speed of the contraction. And anything you do that reduces the speed of the contraction, you need to kind of get rid of them out of this block. For example, weight, resistance. So if you're going too heavy on a certain lift, okay, you need to reduce the weight to improve the speed. Do you know what I mean? Further develop acceleration and advanced plyometrics. So advanced plyometrics simply would be potentially drop landing single leg with a jump, or it could be certain hurdles and stuff like that. But it's just that long-term vision. Instead of simply just doing strength, increasing muscle size, losing body fat, there's absolutely no reason why this cannot be you. Absolutely no reason. So just to wrap it up, it's a long old slog, a long-term mindset. And most of yous on this channel, barely scratch the surface. Most men I know barely scratch the surface on what they're capable of. And, it's my job to keep reminding yous of what yous are capable of, because it's fucking pretty incredible when you realise it. So, in a nutshell, stop your moaning about age, go and train strength, then progress that onto power, then progress that onto speed. Do it in that order, minimise the risk of injury, and absolutely develop your athleticism in the right way. But what's going to be pretty enjoyable about this video is people always want the end result. People want to be fast. They watch the TV, they see all these people that are old, they're fast, they're powerful. People want that. I've explained to you now an overview of how you can actually get there. And when you realise the process, a lot of people, what do? They run a mile. However, that mile that they run is not very fast, not very powerful. So anyway, 20 minutes, gentlemen. A bit of an overview on the way you can counteract the decline of 1% per year after the age of 40 of your type 2B muscle fibres. It won't decline if you train it, if you train it well. If you want to train it well, longevity program awaits you. Thank you very much for your time. Absolute pleasure. Any questions on anything I've mentioned, give us a shout. See you in a bit.